count up a little bit, and we'll get our IDP. There are people asking about the IDP show in the chat room of our other shows. Like the IDP show is now the show that they're talking about during other shows that we're doing on the Audible. So that's fun.
Kind of like that.
Yeah, it's
Does that
great.
mean we get a raise?
Right, exactly. Well, we're raising the consciousness of football fans everywhere. That's what we're doing. It's a more rewarding experience. Trust me, folks. I don't know if anyone's even in the chat room yet. All right, let's go ahead and we will roll. Which teams don't have any three down linebackers? That and more this week on the IDP Roundtable. John Norton, Guru, joining us every week. John, at this point, 4 weeks in, we've got some good data, and some of the data is telling us that for some teams, there isn't that classic three down linebacker. Tell us more.
Yeah, we're actually starting to see a growing trend. We've been talking about this really for the last couple of years. We talked about it a little bit last year that there were a few new teams. The way I got it counted now, there's about 7 teams that have 0 every down linebackers that we can count on. A couple of the teams have players that are putting up decent numbers, but are still lacking a little bit in the consistency we would normally get. The Ravens, Patrick Queen's playing around 80% of the snaps. Cincinnati has nobody playing more than 70% of the snaps with any consistency. Cleveland is a mess right now with between guys coming back from injury and different sub packages and everything else that they've got going on there. We did have B.J. Goodson that was playing pretty much all the time. At these last week, he was down as well, around 75%, I believe. Miami, which has basically become Bill Belichick South, and Detroit, which is Bill Belichick West, are doing the same things that the Patriots have been doing for the last few years with all their sub packages and various defensive sets based on who they're playing that week and whatever the game plan is. Everything is changing there. Miami, we thought we could count on Baker, but apparently that's not the case. He had over 90% the first 2 weeks, dropped off to the low 80s in week 3. And this past week, he played 70% of the snaps. So even that's not anything we can count on at this point. Kansas City was this way last year, and nothing has changed there. We were kind of hoping when they drafted Willie Gay that we would start seeing some more consistency and somebody on the field for 3 downs, but that hasn't happened so far. New England, we kind of had Juwan Bentley that was more or less a 3-down guy. At least he played 100% one of the 4 games, and he's down around 80% in the other 3 weeks. So just the way the league is going with all the speed and all the different adjustments and so forth that the defenses are making to match up with offenses, I think this is a trend we're going to continue to see going forward, and it's going to make the stud linebackers that much more difficult to find and that much more valuable.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the takeaway is just like running back, those few stud running backs do everything running backs. For a while, Matt Schauf, Schaufds, you know him already. You love him. For a while, Demarcus Lawrence was a do everything defensive end for us for our fantasy teams. Actually, in the league that we're in together, our Goyd on Roids league, I was pondering whether to pick up Giovanni Bernard when that news broke on Joe Mixon on Saturday. And the only player I was looking at that I could release is Demarcus Lawrence, who I'm holding on to and hoping he gets it going again. I think I released him, and I don't think anyone snapped him up. Is it time to let Demarcus Lawrence go? Does that mean good things for Everson Griffin and Alden Smith? I think this is a situation, Matt, where with the Dallas offense, if they can actually get out to a lead, and it should happen at some point, right? You're going to be able to tee off on opposing quarterbacks, try to keep up with Dak Prescott and this air show. Who are we going to like? Is it going to eventually be DeMarcus Lawrence?
First, do you mind if I jump back real quick
please.
to linebackers? Let me say that if you're playing in a deep league, I think there's a couple of stash opportunities among those linebacker cores that John just mentioned. I think Cincinnati and Kansas City with Willie Gay and Logan Wilson, reverse them on the teams. But if you're in the kind of deep enough league where you can stash those guys and not need to use them, those are the 2 guys that I would hope might have the upside to become 3-down players by the end of the season. It might not happen for either guy, so I wouldn't go out of my way to do it. But those might be the 2 hopes for those teams if they can develop, because I don't think either of those teams really has an answer beyond the young guys. I think they both want those young guys to develop into something like that. Now, back up to the defensive line. I think Demarcus Lawrence's big problem is that he's playing through a knee injury. And we've seen him do this before where he doesn't say much. He's not one to complain about how his body's bothering him. He's played through a shoulder injury for multiple seasons before. But now they're deep enough that they don't need Demarcus Lawrence to play 75% of the snaps when he's not at full strength. His snap shares so far have gone 63%, 37%, 41%, 51%. And he's not performing that well when he is on the field. He's currently on pace for what would be his worst pass rushing grade since 2016, according to Pro Football Focus. He's got 8 total pressures through 4 games, which is not a great total. And he's got 0 QB hits by the NFL stats. So Demarcus Lawrence is not producing. They have Everson Griffin. They have Aldon Smith. They have enough there where he can just play sometimes. So I do think that currently Demarcus Lawrence is cuttable in a league such as that where, it's not so deep that you can stash him on the bench and not use him. And by the way, Sig, I was annoyed when you picked up Giovanni Bernard because I was hurting for running back there. I picked up Carlos Hyde in that league before finding out that he was not going to play last week because I needed to cover somebody else. And then you dropped Gio Bernard and it didn't end up helping me anyway.
Yeah, Joe Mixon. It was Joe Mixon week, everybody. We might stick a fork, John, in Demarcus Lawrence, depending on the size of our bench. We'll go through some of these guys. Let's just start with the pass rushers, because there are some players that we had some hope for based on what they did last year, guys like Robert Quinn, and some guys that, based on their draft pedigree, we had hope for. Who are some of the defensive line that we can stick a fork in 4 weeks in?
Yeah, we've started off the season. You never want to cut somebody too early because a guy that has a bad first game comes back and blows up right after you cut him, and your opponent picks him up the next week. But I think we've seen enough of these guys at this point to know pretty much where we stand. Robert Quinn, Marcus Golden, Clellan Ferrell, and L.J. Collier are the 4 guys that I have on my list as far as defensive linemen that are cut bait at this point. Ferrell has just been an absolute bust so far for the Raiders. Very early on, I think it was number 4 overall pick, and just has not gotten it done. Max Crosby has kind of been the highlight of that draft situation for them as far as pass rushers go. I think we've seen enough of him to know that it hasn't come on yet. Definitely in redraft leagues, it's time to let go of him. If you're in a dynasty situation, you might want to stash him a little bit longer, but I've not seen anything so far that's led me to believe that he's going to suddenly step up. Same story basically with L.J. Collier. Both of these guys have had plenty of opportunity. They've been in the starting lineup almost from day one because their teams really had nobody else, and neither one of them has done anything. Marcus Golden, excuse me, I don't know what's going on with the Giants there. I mean, he's, in my opinion, probably, if not their second best edge defender. So I don't know if he's in the doghouse because of the holdout situation and not wanting to come back to the team so easily or early on and wind up basically being forced to go there because he had no other options. But for whatever reason, they're not giving him much of an opportunity. So he's not producing. Robert Quinn. And this is the one that really bothers me more than any of these guys because we know what kind of potential this guy has if he's in the right situation. You put him at defensive end in a 3-4 or a 4-3, and he's gold for us. But if he somehow keeps being magnetized and gets stuck in these 3-4 defenses where they're playing him as a stand-up linebacker, and it just doesn't fit his skill set the best. So he's not been producing either. He is coming off of some injury. I think if any of these guys are going to step up, it would be Quinn. But I haven't really seen enough of him so far to think that that's going to happen. And knowing his history as an outside linebacker in a 3-4, it's definitely time to move on for me.
Another Ryan Pace hit. We get to watch the Bears tomorrow night. Hopefully, we'll get to watch the Raiders this weekend, Matt. Hopefully. And we're watching a linebacker group that is getting back to what they had hoped for when they made some moves this offseason, both in the names and the numbers, the productivity. What did we learn about the Raiders linebackers in week 4?
We got Nick Kwiatkowski back, and I learned last year how to pronounce his name properly.
Well done.
He played 87% of the snaps against the Bills, as we were looking for. Got back to full time after he'd been out since hurting a pectoral muscle back in week 1. So got back to the starting job. Nicholas Morrow barely played 18%. Well, that was expected. Morrow was the Kwiatkowski replacement. I'm not worried about the down numbers for Kwiatkowski in that game because Buffalo has been a negative scoring matchup for linebackers this year. So I'm not going to fault him for that. And I'm going to go ahead and, well, not a great matchup with Kansas City, although I think we'll probably get a little bit more rushing from them. So I would probably play Kwiatkowski like in low LB3 range this week. And then Corey Littleton actually showed back up as well. 7 tackles, 6 solos, 1 tackle for loss in what we said is a negative matchup against Buffalo. So it was nice to see him show up. It's going to take a little bit more to show that he's back. It's like I said, Kansas City's not a terrific matchup. It doesn't have really the big play upside that drove his value with the Rams. But, it was at least some production for somebody who's been disappointing since he joined the Raiders. So we'll see what he does going forward. We at least can hold off another week on cutting him outright from our teams.
Yeah, he was supposed to be one of those stud linebackers that John was talking about that are becoming more valuable. We're still waiting. Let's get a little more on the positive side of the linebacker position, John. Some players that we were not sure about coming into the year, players we've talked about on this show this year that now maybe we're open to. We got Miles Jack, again, a groin injury, had a terrific interception. Joe Burrow could have thrown the ball better, but it was a even better play by Jack. Josie Jewell, I feel like the Broncos only have out there because they have to have him out there. He's doing things now. And Kazir White in the Chargers defense that had a real rough week 4. Are we ready to believe in these guys?
Yeah, I'll touch Corey Littleton real quick first. The good sign there is at least he didn't miss a bunch of tackles this week, so definitely things are looking up. That had been kind of his hangnail for the first couple of games there, but I thought he looked a lot more comfortable this week, so I'm pretty pleased and confident that he might actually get things turned around. Miles Jack, Josie Jewell, and Kazir White, all guys that you might remember back, I think it was our first or second show, we had a guy that called in and was asking us about picking up Jack, and we pretty much unanimously told him to go ahead and pick up, I believe it was Alexander Johnson instead, which that wasn't necessarily a bad move, but as it turns out, Jack has really been lighting it up. He's got a groin injury now, maybe out this week, but what has really caught my eye about him, and I said when he came out that I thought the guy had the skill set to play the weak side, but they put him on the strong side for a year, and they wanted him to be in the middle linebacker, and he was just never able to get it done in those positions. But now he's in the weak side position. Excuse me. He seems to be at home in that defense. That's a position that has been highly productive over the years for Jacksonville. And I think Jack is, once he gets healthy again, he's just going to continue to roll. I'm really impressed with what I've seen from him, and it's basically changed my entire opinion of what I think of him as a player at this point. Josie Jewell is another guy similarly. He got stuck in the lineup a year ago, 2 years ago, played a little bit, just didn't quite seem to have it. He struggled in coverage, wasn't quite quick to make moves on the play when he didn't see things coming very well. Last year he had an opportunity to get in the starting lineup as well and struggled again. So we all just kind of wrote him off thinking, well, he's just not going to get it done. He's maybe a 2-down linebacker at best and so forth. Injuries, we thought, kind of put him in the lineup this year. It was kind of surprising when they cut Todd Davis, or at least that was a shocker to me. But now we're starting to see maybe why. Jewell has really begun to come on. His anticipation has gotten much better. He's a lot quicker to react to plays when he sees what's going on in front of him. He's getting in on the pass rush. He's doing better in coverage. And it's another guy that I think in year 3 has really flipped a switch and turned the corner. So I like what I've seen from him going forward. And I think between him and Alexander Johnson, Denver is pretty well set at the inside linebacker position with 2 really good young players that are going to be there for a while. Kazir White was supposed to have been a starter a couple years ago. Injury struck, didn't happen. He got back on the field. We weren't sure if he was going to continue to play 100% once Nick Vigil and everybody was healthy there. They had Vigil back this past week. Vigil didn't get on the field. Kazir White played 100% of the snaps for the second straight week. Put up really good numbers for the third straight week. And I think at this point, he's somebody that we can count on going forward. I don't really see that we still have a little concern with the Chargers coaching staff there, and they've pulled the rug out from under us in the past at times. But so far, I'm starting to feel pretty confident that White's going to be there for the long term for us.
Get to watch those linebackers on Monday night. We'll see if that game's played in New Orleans or Indianapolis with the potential of Hurricane Delta. Stay with some positive linebacker stuff, Matt. Foyesade Oluokun, who out of Yale. Love seeing the Ivy Leaguers, brains and brawn, right? What was it, Matt, in week 2? Like, he played 18 snaps, and the coach said, like, it was the best 18 snaps he's ever seen anyone play, something like that. More than 18 snaps against Green Bay. What did we observe on Monday night?
Yeah, he returned from injury, played 97% of the snaps against Green Bay. I mean, I watched the game. I didn't see a whole lot in any direction there. That was a crappy game to watch, honestly. But
yeah,
like you said, right before Foyesade Oluokun went down, he gave us a tremendous effort there. It looks like he could be what Devondre Campbell was for us last year in Atlanta, because we're still not getting the numbers from Deion Jones that we were getting back before his spate of injuries. So, I mean, Foyesade Oluokun, somebody that I added in a league or two over the past week as soon as I found out he was going to make it back for the Green Bay game. I think there's tackle upside to him immediately, especially starting this week against Carolina. It could be a spot for it to really show up, because Carolina's been a positive matchup for linebacker scoring so far. I would try to go ahead and grab him and use him this week if you have, any questions about your current linebacker state.
Yeah, take advantage of how the Atlanta Falcons defense is probably going to spend a lot of time on the field. But, maybe even against Carolina, that could be one that gets Dan Quinn fired, since losing to Minnesota got Bill O'Brien fired. Let's go on the flip side. And the linebackers, John, that we're ready to stick a fork in at this point, opening up those spots for waiver wire pickups.
Yeah, I got 4 guys on my list, starting with Danny Trevathan. We talked about him a little bit last week. Hasn't been getting it done. His playing time is slacking from what it was last year. He went from 100% linebacker most games last year. This year, he's lucky if he gets up around 80% in a game, most of the time less than that. And he's not been particularly productive with the snaps that he has been given. 3 tackles and an assist this past week on, I believe, 78% or something like that. Just not getting it done. Injuries over the years may be taking their toll on him, but he just doesn't seem to have that crispness that he's had in the past. Tahir Whitehead, we thought he was going to be a 3-down linebacker. That's not the case. Now he's stuck playing in a 2-down role with the outside linebackers both keeping the 3-down roles there. Last week he saw 51, 53%, something like that. Last couple of weeks he's just not getting the opportunity that he's had in the past. He was never a great player for us to begin with, but losing so much opportunity has really hurt his numbers this year. Juwan Bentley, I mentioned a little bit already. Even playing the game that he played 100%, the guy just can't seem to get more than 3 tackles in a single game, solo tackles at least. So the opportunity has been there for him to put up better numbers, and he's just not getting it done. Alex Anzalone has been playing virtually full-time. He played 97% of the snaps this past week, had his best game of the season, which was 4 solo tackles and an assist. And that's just not going to be enough for us to be roster-worthy going forward. I think there's a lot better options out there for any of these guys. So you find people, one of the hardest decisions to make is always, who am I going to get rid of? Because you know that as soon as you cut somebody, they're going to go off, or at least that's the way it tends to work for me. But these are 4 guys at linebacker that I think we can definitely live without the rest of the way.
Let's go back to that Cowboys defense, Matt. Maybe Demarcus Lawrence isn't going to do it for us. Maybe some of the safeties that we were looking at to begin the season aren't going to do it for us. But we did see someone emerge in week 4 in that epic game against the Browns. Tell us about Donovan Wilson.
Yeah, Donovan Wilson jumped from special teams only to starter last week. He was only special teams through the first 3 weeks, not a single defensive snap. And then all of a sudden in game 4, he pops up for 93% playing time at strong safety against the Browns, racked up a team-high 10 tackles, 6 solos in that game, and a sack. So it's a high upside position if he sticks there. I mean, over the summer, I was on board with HaHa Clinton Dix because he was in that spot. Then it was going to be Darian Thompson. I was like, okay, I guess I'll drop HaHa and pick up Darian Thompson because that strong safety spot has been a high upside IDP position under Mike Nolan at various stops. I think at least 4 different teams now he's had a well-performing IDP safety at that spot. Michael Lewis with the Niners, Brian Dawkins, William Moore, I'm sorry, we're not that close, back in Atlanta. So whoever can settle in as this strong safety under Mike Nolan, I'm on board with taking on him no matter how good he actually is in real life. And with all that is getting through the Dallas defense, I mean, that's only going to make it an even better spot to be at the back of it. We didn't get any huge numbers from Donovan Wilson in college. So, again, it's not that I'm buying into the athlete. It's all about situation. And especially with that fast-paced offense that's scoring points and going to keep pressure on opponents and keep things moving, I think there could be a lot of tackles coming the way of Donovan Wilson if he remains the guy. It's been 1 week, so we'll see. It could be a totally different guy in week 5. The week before, we saw Dirk mixing in for safety snaps with several other people. So maybe it was a matter of Worley having to play cornerback with some injuries there. Maybe he'll get back into the safety mix this week. So I'm not saying trust Donovan Wilson in week 5, but maybe we'll see Donovan Wilson prove trustworthy in week 5 and beyond. Let's hope for that.
Yeah, let's hope for that. And we see it every year, John, in IDP leagues. Some players will emerge, like Matt was saying, they don't have much of a pedigree, they don't have much of a background, but at a certain point you stop arguing with the numbers and you start benefiting from them. Give us your thoughts on Wilson and also Ryan Neal, as Seattle's had a couple of injuries at safety and Neal has performed admirably.
Yeah, by the way I look at it, give me a decent player in a great situation better than a great player in a poor situation every time, and you're going to get better numbers out of it. Situation is definitely vital. Wilson, I completely agree with Matt's analysis there. If the guy winds up staying on the field, it's going to be a target-rich environment. He's going to have plenty of opportunity there. And I also agree that the biggest fear is that next week they'll try something else because they got the same results this week when they put him back there. So we'll see how that goes going forward. But if he does manage to hold on to that position, I think he might be a great asset for us down the stretch. Ryan Neal was a practice squad journeyman, basically. He's been on several different practice squads over the past few years, hasn't had a starting job, hasn't even played a snap really in the NFL yet, other than on special teams. Got his opportunity with all the injuries there in Seattle and actually put up some pretty good numbers and looked surprisingly well on the field. 5 tackles, an assist, and an interception, and an extra pass defended on top of the interception. So getting it done against the run and run support, looks solid in coverage as well. They're going to be without Adams again this week. They've got a couple other guys that are still banged up that are not likely to make it back anytime soon. So there may be an opportunity for him to stick there for a while. Definitely not a guarantee that he's going to be in there for the long term, but he's going to be there at least until they get some people back healthy that can push him out. So he's got an opportunity to prove himself. He may be another one of those guys. I mean, how many players have we seen in Seattle secondary over the years that came from basically nowhere and wound up being great players? Maybe he's the next guy to put his name on that list.
And for IDP, you have to love that he's playing stressed out offenses, quarterbacks out of their comfort zone, having to keep up with Russ in the cooking. I don't want to be in a cooking contest with Russell Wilson. Matt, Carolina. Let's talk about Carolina's pass rushers. Not the first time we brought up Carolina's pass rush. However, this is a team that's maybe going to have a winning record after this week. They play Atlanta. That's all that's standing between them and a winning record. To talk about maybe getting Dan Quinn fired. If this team is maybe playing with the lead, they're going to get Christian McCaffrey back soon. Are there pass rushers that we could use in our IDP leagues?
By the way, I'll take on Russell Wilson in a cooking contest because he's only making healthy stuff.
Yeah, that's true. Bland.
All you got to do is make ribs or something, take him down. But on to the Carolina pass rushers. And we had talked about Brian Burns last week. John hit on him. It seems like he might be having a breakthrough season after, kind of an up and down rookie season, which wasn't surprising given that he entered the league as a smallish guy. But Brian Burns then went out and had a quiet day against the Cardinals. The kind of quiet day, though, that wasn't as bad as the quiet numbers would indicate. He had 1 tackle for loss. He had 3 quarterback hits, and that number quadruples his season total for 4 games. So he might actually be building on the pass rushing front without giving us a sack in that game. We'll watch that going forward, but this week against Atlanta is a nice spot for him to build on that. So Brian Burns is certainly a guy to keep around. If you've been using him to this point, you already liked that he was giving us tackles, which were not on the plate last season. And then on the other side, Yetur Gross-Matos had his first NFL sack on Sunday, a strip sack, a nice play that was initially called an incomplete pass, but it was clearly a strip sack. So he still hasn't played more than 37% of the snaps. So it's too early to actually use Gross-Matos in lineups. But if he starts giving the Panthers coaches what they need from him, I mean, they're going to have not a whole lot of reason to keep from raising his playing time. Maybe they're just patient with him all season because they realize he's young and he'll need to develop. And they do have Stephen Weatherly there, who is a veteran who came in as a free agent. So, perhaps the playing time does stay down, but it's at least going to be worth watching him over the next couple of weeks. Again, if you're playing in a deep enough league where you can stash players and wait to see, maybe you stash him now and see what happens, see if the playing time does climb. If he does keep playing like 40%, even if he's productive, that's not going to be the kind of player that you can use outside of terrific matchups, but it's at least promising to see something there. He was a second-round pick, so it's certainly not out of the question for him to turn into somebody that we can use pretty quickly.
Yeah, I like this all defense Panthers draft starting to come around, and really watching the way Jeremy Chin has performed and the way that Isaiah Simmons, another player the Cardinals can't quite figure out. The Derek Brown pick also looking good. Always the picks every week from the Guru. We get to our starts and sits. John, who do you have for us for week 5?
I'm going to jump back on the Carolina thing just for one quick statement there. I think if Gross-Matos can actually get things going and take a little bit of the pressure off of Brian Burns, it'll go a long way towards making both of them better in the long run. They just really don't have another threat there besides him, so it's pretty easy for offenses to stack up against Burns at this point. Hopefully that'll change. All right, got enough data to kind of work with now and get a pretty good idea what's going on, so I've got several guys that you want to look at getting in your lineup this week. I like Justin Reed versus Jacksonville. We've seen Kenny Vaccaro, 10 tackles, an assist, and a sack, 2 passes defended in week 2. The Miami safeties combined for 9 tackles, 7 assists in week 3. Jesse Bates was 6-4-0, 2 passes defended in week 4. I think Justin Reed gets in on that a little bit as well. If you can figure out who the healthy safeties are in Atlanta, you probably want to get them in your lineup this week against Carolina. That matchup has seen Jonathan Abraham put up 16.5 points, or Abram, I should say, put up 16.5 points. Antone Winfield, 20.75. Nazir Adderley, 10.5 points. Curtis Riley and Charles Washington combined for 14.25 at the safety spot last week. So if we get an answer to the injury situation there and know who's going to start for the Falcons, that player is probably going to be a good target. Marlon Humphrey against Cincinnati. And it seems like we talk every week about the Bengals being a good matchup for corners. It's a little difficult to pick which guy they're going to pick on every week. But we know that Humphrey has been the most productive of the corners there for them, for the Ravens. And an educated guess, I'm picking him as the guy that they're going to go after this week. At this point, opponents' corner positions have averaged 17 tackles and 3 assists against the Bengals. James Bradbury versus Dallas. The opponent's corner positions have averaged 17 tackles against the Cowboys as well. The way they're having to throw the ball to stay in games, Bradbury is going to be a busy man this weekend. Chris Claybrooks versus Houston. He's a rookie 7th-round pick that got stuck into the starting lineup because C.J. Henderson is down and Hayden is also down. And that stuck Claybrooks into the lineup. Looks like neither one of the starters is going to be able to get back on the field this week, so Claybrooks should be in there again against Houston. Like Micah Hyde versus Tennessee. Hyde's a guy that a couple years ago had a great season for us and then kind of flatlined for the last 2 years, and it looks like he might be back to the old form, putting up pretty strong tackle numbers for us. Haven't seen the big plays come around yet, but a solid matchup with Tennessee in that running game could be an opportunity for another 6-7 solo tackle game. Like Logan Ryan as well versus Dallas this week. Yeah. I got my notes confused there. The Giants are banged up at safety. At least one safety has had 6 or more solo tackles against the Cowboys in every game to date. We already talked about the Falcons versus Carolina. So I agree with Foyesade Oluokun being a quality start this week. Devin White, Levante David, Kazir White, Jordan Hicks have all averaged 8 tackles and 4 assists with that matchup. Anthony Walker against Cleveland. We didn't get to talk much about all the injuries in Indianapolis at this point. Bobby Okereke is battling a thumb injury. Darius Leonard left early in the game with a groin injury. So those two guys looks like Leonard's probably not going to play this week. Okereke is questionable. But either way, it looks like Anthony Walker is going to be the lead linebacker of that group for at least the next couple of games. I like Corey Littleton against Kansas City. The Chiefs haven't been a great matchup, but I have a feeling that he's going to see a lot of Travis Kelce. He's hopefully will match up well speed-wise and coverage skills against Kelce. I think they'll at least give that a shot. They don't really have anybody else that matches up well with him, so I think that's going to be something that we see quite a bit. Dakota Allen versus Houston. We talked about the Miles Jack injury. Allen was the guy that stepped in last week at weak side linebacker, and we've seen over the years what gaudy numbers that weak side linebacker position has produced. We look back at what Donald Payne did last year down the stretch. He won a lot of owners some championships last year. Yannick Ngakoue had his first big game of the season last week, 5 tackles and a sack. Gets Seattle this week. Seattle has given up more than 2 sacks per game to opposing defensive ends so far this season. Trey Hendrickson versus the Chargers recorded a sack in 3 of the last 4 games, and the Chargers have allowed 5 sacks to edge rushers with at least 1 in every game so far this season. Seems like we've mentioned a little bit of Everson Griffin. I like his matchup with the Giants as well. The Giants have allowed 14 sacks, with 13 of those sacks going to either defensive end or edge rushers. Calais Campbell versus the Bengals. Bengals actually looked pretty decent last week with their offensive line, but I don't think they really were challenged as much as they will be this week as far as pass rush goes. I think Calais Campbell has his first really big game of the season. Javon Kinlaw is a guy we haven't really talked about a whole lot other than all the upside, but the guy's been making a lot of plays on the field that haven't really shown up in the box scores. I think this week against Miami, we might start seeing a little bit of that impact spread into the scores for us and make some good start for fantasy owners. A couple guys we want to get out of our lineup this week. Dante Fowler versus Carolina. The Panthers are allowing less than 1 sack per game. Max Crosby versus the Chiefs. Nobody seems to be able to get to the Chiefs quarterback very easily. They've only allowed 3 sacks on the season, and the Raiders are only averaging 1 per game as a team at this point. William Jackson has been a sneaky good start at the corner position recently for whatever reason. After so many years of basically doing nothing, he's starting to put up good numbers. But the Ravens don't throw the ball very often. No corner has more than 3 tackles against them this year, and there's no interceptions by a corner either. And the last one would be Jalen Smith versus the Giants. That's a guy that you really can't afford to bench. I'm sure you're going to have to put him in your lineup, but I don't have grand expectations for him with that matchup, especially the way the Giants are not running the ball at this point.
Yeah, you can look at the Giants' stats and just know that they're playing bad football. And it makes it difficult to forecast how teams will play against them, as we saw them drag down the Rams with them last week. We're never going to drag you down here. We're going to lift you up in your IDP leagues. And again, congratulations on playing IDP fantasy football, the real fantasy football that helps you appreciate the entire game. As always, we get great insight from Matt Schauf from Draft Sharks, SCHAUFDS on Twitter, and the guru, John Norton. You find him and all the great work from the IDP team at footballguys.com. You deserve the best always, folks, because you're so classy.